So finally, what about the political themes of the novels?
And of course, I'm a political writer, so these were often especially interesting to me. And it's a big reason why the fifth book is so interesting and my favorite, because Order of the Phoenix is when the Ministry is becoming corrupt, Voldemort is seeking a return to power and trying to take over, so we are seeing the rise of this tyranny. But more in this stage, it's the Ministry becoming corrupt. And at Hogwarts, this is embodied by the cruel witch who's awful and is taking over and imposing these arbitrary constraints. Umbridge, I couldn't remember her name for a second. And so you have the students fighting her and her fighting the other good teachers. And to me, that's just really interesting politically. And so you have the Minister corruption. In subsequent books, you have Voldemort taking over, becoming a Hitler-like dictator. And you get the really interesting Hitler parallels with hunting the half-bloods and the Muggle-borns and hating the Muggles. And you have this statue, right, where Muggles are all in this gnarly mound beneath the wizards. And you really get these images of the concentration, at least I think it's intentional, of the concentration camps. So I think there's some...
Well, requiring people to inform on each other. I mean, there's all of
right,
those kind of things.
Yeah,
too,
and these politically motivated persecutions at that point. And Umbridge loving it, this idea that she has this absolute control over people's destinies. It's really quite spooky and scary, but effective politically. Oh, and you also have the censorship, of course, prior to this period, and then, of course, under Voldemort as well. This outright, then it becomes... The Ministry is issuing propaganda and controlling the press outright. Right. So all these, I think, are really interesting. You have one thing that's peculiar, right? When you get to the end of the books and you remember Hermione's fight against elf slavery, and you realize that's never really wrapped up. You get the idea that this might be a long-term battle to phase out elf slavery, but there's no real... It's not like there's the abolitionist cause alive and well.
Right.
You don't get the sense that this is going to be wrapped up in the next few years or anything. And another thing that I thought was...
one of the reasons for that, right, and one of the puzzling things about and I think one of the interestingly complex things about the way she portrays this is, I mean, Dobby wants to be free, but Winky and all the other elves don't want to be. And, I mean, they want to be under a good master, but it's hard to free people that don't themselves wish to be free, and because of Dobby's death, which is one of the most horrific moments in the books for me, because of that, there's in a sense at least no elf, no internal agitator for elf liberation, and I wonder if that sort of made a difference in whatever sort of fictional story.
Maybe that's right, and I don't know if Rowling just didn't get around to wrapping that up, or if she was trying to say something deeper there.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure, but yeah, you're right. Dobby was the main advocate of elf freedom, and then he's not around at the end, so that has something to do with that. But another oddity political-wise is this idea of segregation of the magical and non-magical world, which I regard largely as a plot device, right? Because it allows her to imagine that there's actually wizards out there walking among us, right? When we see somebody dressed really weird or goofily with a big robe, that might be a wizard who's just out in our world right now, right?
Right.
Which is great dramatically, I think, because it brings you closer to the fantasy world. But in another way, it's odd because you have wizards literally wiping out memories from Muggles against their will.
Right.
Which to me, that's a pretty big violation of their person and rights. And you have all these raids to confiscate illegal objects that do magical things against the magical code, like magical teacups and such. They're Muggle artifacts, right?
Yeah, which is there to protect the Muggles, but then you also have that it's like even though, and we talked about this a little bit before the interview, there's some technology that is more advanced than what people can get by magic. Nonetheless, that's forbidden. Is it forbidden or is it just frowned upon? I thought it was forbidden for wizards to have that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Like, I don't think wizards can have iPhones, right?
No, I think that wizards can use Muggle technology without limit.
Okay.
But
for instance,
they take the trains and such, and they drive automobiles. But I think it's illegal to make Muggle artifacts magical.
Okay.
Now, there's a loophole, right? Because Arthur, who's enforcing these laws, is also very clever at figuring out loopholes, and he tells his wife something to the effect of, well, I can enchant the car as long as I don't really intend to use it that way. I forget the exact pretext he used, but he's basically
clearly violating his own
he's going
rules.
on these raids to raid other people of their stuff, but he can get away with turning all these Muggle artifacts into magical objects. because he thinks it's fun, right? He thinks it's a fun hobby. So there are these odd sorts of tensions. I think it creates some tensions, but I don't really think it's that important because it's more of a plot device.
Right.
Nevertheless, I thought it was worth thinking about.